Hey everyone, welcome back to the Quirky Cooking Podcast. I'm Jo and I'm so glad you're here today. Today we are diving into the fascinating world of red light therapy and infrared saunas. So joining me is Johannes, the founder of Clearlight Saunas. Have I got that right?
Yes.
Johannes? Yes.
Yep.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And you're an expert in sauna technology and the transformative impact on our health of red light therapy and heat therapy. So we have got so many questions for you. I put a post in my chat groups and oh my goodness, the amount of questions. I was like, took me an hour or so to copy them over. But I thought really probably the best way to get started is if you just tell us your story, how you got into this, why you love it, what's important about it, and how it can help. And then we'll sort of dive into any questions you haven't answered. That would be
Yeah, I'd
great.
love to.
Take it
Yeah, thank
away.
you. So my background is engineering. So I'm not, I wasn't born and figured, I'm just going to create a sauna company or, sell red light therapy units. And I'm German, as the name indicates. I think we sort of figured out we probably have a similar history in terms of the name,
Yes,
Joanne, Johannes,
Joanna.
Joe. Um, and I
Joe and
studied in
Yo.
Germany and then moved to New Zealand. And that's where I wrote my thesis and worked there for years as an engineer. And met my business partner who had been ways deeper into health. Like he used to travel to the Longevity Now conferences in LA. That was when David Wolf, some of you probably still
Yeah.
remember him, was sort of really at the peak of popularity.
Mhm.
Dr. McCullough, I think, was just getting started with infrared saunas. So some of these really big US specific doctors and names that were floating around. And that's where we met Clearlight. So when you sort of introduced me as one of the founders, that's correct. Although just want to really mention that Clearlight is an American company that has been around for 26, 27 years now. And we've been the first international distributor. And we've been with them for 11 years. No, that was really when Clearlight was quite small. But what was really great about Clearlight is that they back then, even 11 years ago, they understood what EMF was. And I know there's a ton of questions
Mm.
that you will probably fire at me.
There was a
Um,
lot of questions about
but
EM.
11, yeah, great. But 11 years ago, there wasn't a thing. Like,
Mm.
no one
Knew
barely
about it.
actually knew what EMF was for. And I think a lot of research was just getting started, but they were one of the first sauna companies that really figured out, hey, if we design, develop, and manufacture infrared saunas, we obviously want to do that so that they're really beneficial for our health. Common sense nowadays, right?
Mm.
But back then, what you don't know what you don't know, right? And I think like EMF, you can't really see it. Some people feel it, but it's there. You can quantify it, you can measure it, and that's really what appealed us to Clearlight. We became friends, and then we decided, hey, this is really missing in Australasia, in Australia, and New Zealand. And we literally got a first shipment into New Zealand. My business partner is 11 years older. I was 23 at that time, and we
Oh,
literally said
wow.
to people,
That's so
"We don't have
cool.
these saunas yet. They'll come in 6 months. You have to trust us. You have to pay us." And people did, because
That's awesome.
internationally people were really waiting for Clearlight. And now 11 years later, we sort of added Australia to the market. I'm back in Europe. So I go back and forth between Europe, the UAE, and Australia, which is sort of our core markets. My focus really has become health and wellness. So I do a lot of podcasts. I also support sort of our engineering team when it comes to bringing in technologies or inventions to the market. And what we did probably a year ago is that we realized like Clearlight obviously is one of the market leaders for infrared saunas, but we do have an appetite for other products that Clearlight is not interested in or associated with. We started a second brand called Helsi, Health Simplified, and sort of really also captures the sort of Northern European DNA that we both bring to the business. And we've launched the red light therapy, a new portable sauna dome, and the ice bath recently. And yeah, that's my story. I love to talk about health wellness. I've sort of, because of that engineering background, I feel like I sort of bring a lot of expertise around frequencies and EMF because it is it's a very
Mm.
technical and physical topic. And I'd love to talk about that and really answer all the questions that we face today.
Well, that's good because, yeah, I think for me, EMFs came under my radar only a couple of years ago. And I have a friend who I run retreats with in Italy who is a building biologist. And so she you know, sort of it started to get me into all this. But really, I guess I didn't realize before that I hadn't really noticed any, you know, reactions or anything, but she is very sensitive, and so is her daughter. And yeah, realizing how much it affects us, I guess, even if we don't really feel it. How can you explain a little bit about EMFs and how they affect us? Just because I know there's
Yeah.
a lot of people wanting to know, is this safe? But then there's also the people saying, what are EMFs?
Yeah. I always start off by really saying that I think even the biggest skeptics would probably understand that you don't want to sleep under a power line or don't want to sleep on a Wi-Fi router. Like, I think, you know, that's where I think everyone
Common
agrees, and
sense.
everyone, even the biggest skeptics, say,
Yeah.
okay, I get it. Like, there's some sort of frequency that carries information because that's how Wi-Fi works. And surely this is going to affect whatever is around it, right? Like, I think that's probably the minimum baseline I think we can all agree on. Now, EMF stands technically for electromagnetic frequencies. So we have electricity, we have magnetism, and we have frequencies, and that's essentially how the word is made up. But most people don't understand that there's actually a couple of different types of frequencies. So we have EMF, which is measured in milligauss or micro Tesla. We have ELF, which stands for extremely low frequencies or electrical frequencies, and we have HF, which stands for high frequencies. So that's typically Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. And people always mix these things up. They just say, oh, well, this is all EMF. But technically, you really have to distinguish between the type of EMF and what really matters. And to your point, in terms of some people are really sensitive to that, that's exactly what I see. Like in our showrooms, we sometimes, when we used to have a showroom in Europe, people used to come by train. Obviously, public transport is fantastic here. A lot of the trains run on electricity. And because of the fact that Clearlight has probably the lowest EMF infrared saunas on the market, these guys come sometimes 6 hours train rides, you know, and they jump on there, and then they come, and some of them have literally said they feel fried. And I said, what do you mean? Well, the exposure in a train due to the high electricity demand that it runs on is absolutely insane, and I feel like I got microwaved.
Wow.
And I don't have that, right? So I can drive a Tesla, I can drive an electric vehicle, I can drive a train. I don't feel it. What I do feel though is like if I have a headset, you know, obviously when I'm on calls a lot, I have these Bluetooth headsets, and if I wear these for more than 2 hours, I get headaches. Like you know, my head just feels differently, and a lot of people resonate with that.
Yeah, a lot of people say that.
Exactly, and the worst of them all, unfortunately, are the Apple AirPods. As lovely as they are, as practical, as handy as, you know, they're fantastic. I literally had to return them because I can't wear them, but my wife, you know, she's able to wear them. But that's where I really noticed in my private life that, oh my God, like I am sensitive to that, which I thought I wasn't. But I think there's various different stages, and what I personally don't understand is like, you know, is it that sort of the tolerance builds up over time? Or is it, for instance, also if you have been exposed to very high loads of EMF, does your body just at some point give in and you develop that sensitivity? Because in Europe, hyper-electricity sensitivity is a thing. Like actually doctors can subscribe that. And I've met a few engineers who used to work in large electricity or, you know, technology businesses where they were literally exposed to high EMF for a number of years, who are now absolutely dazzled and fried. And so that's just a bit of a backstory. But what EMF really is like whenever electricity flows, which, you know, obviously if you have electricity sockets in the wall outlets, or if you have a train, or if you have an infrared sauna, these all run on electricity, right? So you have a current that runs from minus to plus, you know, and obviously the more electricity I think something consumes, the higher the EMF is, right? So technically, if you have, for instance, an electrical stove, these typically have quite high EMF because obviously they need a lot of power. Whereas if you charge your phone and you literally have it in flight mode or you have it off, you know, this does not consume a whole lot of electricity, therefore the EMF is smaller. Now the phone has, you know, again, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, right? So that's, you can see already it's a different problem if you talk about EMF with a phone, because it's more about the Bluetooth and radio frequencies. And if we now sort of just to reflect on what that actually means for health and wellness, is that we have all these amazing health and wellness technologies that come to the market. And they all run on electricity, right? So if you have a sauna blanket, or if you have an infrared sauna or a red light therapy, now these obviously consume electricity, and therefore they emit some sort of EMF. Every health and wellness device emits some sort of EMF. Now, some companies will say it's no, there's no EMF. Facts based is actually not true, and it really comes down to how the company or how the manufacturer has thought about it from a design perspective, from making technological or manufacturing enhancements to the product to really reduce it, so that it's safe for you to use as an individual. And especially in an infrared sauna, it's very problematic, because if you think about it, you're sort of sitting in this room. Let's say it's a meter by a meter. You have heaters all around you. All of these heaters produce some sort of electricity. So you're literally in a cage, so to speak, and you have EMF all around you. And that's, I think, where the market over the last 10 years has really gone a long way, because it's trendy. There's lots of companies to the market. And fortunately, some of the companies, including Clearlight, have really figured out how can you design and produce an infrared sauna that produces as little EMF as possible. And that's sort of the backstory of it. Now, this is not any woo-woo. Like the World Health Organization has published lots of content on it. There's several hundreds to thousands of studies that sort of link potential health hazards to EMF. These range from insomnia, immune system, fatigue, all the way to some experts who really say that high exposure to EMF can link to cancer. Now, I've not seen this and I've not confirmed this, but I'm sure everyone has seen sort of this floating around. If you're on your phone by 5 to 6 hours, some people develop sort of cancer in the ear. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I haven't had the time to really look into that, but it just shows the potential health issues that we are facing, and with the technology just developing and progressing as it
so
currently
quickly.
does, this will become more and more important in the future.
So what would you say sets your brand apart from other, say, saunas and red light therapy panels? You're able to reduce the EMFs. Is that one of the main things that would set you apart, do you think?
Well, if we talk about EMF, then I think that's really where we're not compromising. Like I think I mentioned to you earlier, like every sauna, every red light panel has EMF, right? So it's just a fact that you have to accept. Now, with the red light therapy, I think it's a lot easier, because you're only using it for 10 to 15 minutes. I know we'll talk about usage options later. And then B, the distance, ideally you position yourself 20 to 30 centimeters away. Most of these devices, actually, when you move away for 10 centimeters, the EMF drops to zero. It's electromagnetic frequencies. Electrical fields, yes, they're there, but overall, say a half body red light therapy panel maybe uses 400 watts. So it's not a whole lot. And you'll actually see that EMF is sort of quite low. Now, some of them have a Wi-Fi connectivity, and you can use an app. If you are skeptical about Wi-Fi, they don't use it. Some of them use a Bluetooth connection. As a tendency, Bluetooth is a lot less intense than Wi-Fi. So you do want to prioritize Bluetooth over Wi-Fi. But I'm not so worried about red light because of the distance and because of the fact that it consumes a lot less electricity. Infrared saunas, on the other hand, are a lot more complex, right? Because you're using them for a much longer time. You're using them for 30 to 45 minutes, ideally. You have heaters all around you. You have a lot more electricity consumption than you would have in a red light therapy device. And that's really where it becomes quite tricky. And the whole market and what companies say, you unfortunately can't trust them. Like even some of the market leaders in Australia say that it's low EMF, but I've personally probably measured every single infrared sauna company that is sort of in our market segment. Now, we're top end, lifetime warranty. There's obviously a price point with it, and there's probably 3 or 4 competitors. I've measured all of them. All of them say it's low EMF, but it's not. And now the question is, what do you call low EMF? There's no official definition. You can say that, well, if I measure it 20 centimeters away from the heater and it's say 3 milligauss or 0, then you could call it low EMF. But one, I think, really has to imagine that you obviously sit at the back wall fairly close to the heater. And what I've measured with competitors, it's sometimes 20 milligauss, which is it's 7 times more than what the World Health organization deems as acceptable.
Wow.
And the company is not transparent about it. And that's my
Mm.
main issue I have with the infrared sauna market. Like there's a lot of, whilst the product may be good, the integrity piece is really missing for me to really transparently say that, yes, there are hotspots in the sauna where EMF is high. And I think, remember that I've mentioned EMF is always and is always there. There's
You
no
can't have it
zero
without.
EMF infrared sauna, right? So it
Mm.
comes down to, and I think that's what we're so good at, is we try to design and position the parts of the sauna in a way so that where you sit, we call it virtually zero, right? So we talk about the electromagnetic frequencies, that is zero where you sit. But if you measured it on the heater or in the roof, you would pick up EMF signals. Some of them is quite high, but it dissipates and drops to zero when you move away, say 10, 15 centimeters. And we achieve that by doing a few different things. Number one, most of the electrics are up in the roof. They're as far away from the body as possible. We use sort of a metal and a silver foil inside the roof because that reflects some of the EMF and ELF outside of the cabin. That's why they're in the roof. The heaters, now that becomes very technical, but on the heater, you obviously have electricity. It runs from minus to plus. And on the backside of the heater, we have an opposite pole. And some remember from the physics lessons that we probably had in school that mitigates electromagnetic fields. So it reduces, it becomes, becomes in harmony. So that's just some of the stuff that we do. There's individual grounding wires for every single heater. So there's a lot of stuff that is not really visible to the eye.
That most people wouldn't know about, and they just look at the price point and they don't really know why.
And, and that's, I think, the problem I have with that market, right? Every company can say they're low EMF, but it's so complex. And there's unfortunately a lack of transparency in most companies that I've seen in Australia. And I feel like that's where we really try to be different. We really try to, like, if someone wants to talk EMF deep talk with us, most of the team are confident to do that.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And they'll transparently say, look, these are the hotspots. And yes, if that's an issue to you, they were probably not the right company. But hands down, I've not found a single infrared sauna worldwide that has lower EMF levels.
Yeah. So with the Helsi one, like I have the dome kind of one, that's a single.
Yeah.
Those of you who are listening and haven't seen this before, it's like well, maybe you can explain it for us. It's for one person to lay in there.
Yeah, so obviously with Clearlight, we do cabins, right? So the smallest one is a sort of 1 by 1 times 2 meters, all the way up to an outdoor 5, which is 2 meter times something, so, right? So quite big. We call them cabins. They're literally wooden enclosed cabins. And around 3.5 years ago, we figured that what's really missing is a portable infrared sauna that does not compromise the safety, the quality. And I think the last pain point we wanted to resolve is something that actually looks really pleasing and really, where you look at it and you think, great, that's a beautiful design. Like, okay, like I understand, this is a piece of furniture almost. That's what we wanted to create.
It's not something to hide away.
Well, there you go. And so we went and we actually literally opened a production facility outside of Byron and Brunswick Head. And over 3 years, we sort of developed prototypes. And I think the first 100 units we actually produced in Australia. And we wanted to create this portable sauna that you can easily fold away, that looks good. It has red light included, is low EMF, but still super intense. And that's the Helsi one, because Clearlight didn't really want to produce a portable high-end infrared sauna that really doesn't compromise on quality and safety. And that's our version of the Helsi one, which has red light included. It's an infrared sauna at the same time. Plus, it's designed to act as a bit of a standing desk or a piece of furniture where you can put some flowers on, and it actually looks good. And it sort of guests would come and be like, "Oh, what's that?" And then you sort of present that. That was the idea. So
I get that. What is that?
Yeah.
So with the safety for that one, I guess you are laying away. Like you're probably 50 centimeters away from the heaters.
Yeah. So I think, the Helsi one, it's a challenge because you're technically, like, you lie on the mat, for instance, you're quite close to the elements, to the heating elements, right? And I think that was really the engineering challenge to figure out how can we make this low EMF and safe. And I think that's why it's a fairly big unit. Like these infrared sauna blankets, which works like a sleeping bag, for instance, you're really close to the material. Like, and I think for someone who really understands infrared, it's actually not real infrared. It's more like a temperature buildup inside the sleeping bag, and that's how you sweat. And is it great for someone that's on a budget and who wants to break a sweat? Absolutely. But is it, is it really like safe in terms of EMF and something great and the way it works and effective? Probably not. And I think with the Helsi One, because you're so close to the heaters, that was a real challenge. And I think we sort of took the same innovation for the Clearlight cabins, but translated that sort of into this portable design and included red light. Now the red light is a little bit weaker than a standalone unit. That's just due to the fact that it needs to withstand higher temperatures inside of it. But it still is great because you can lie down, you can listen to a meditation, you can probably even speak with someone, you can watch something if you wanted to, you could use the red light, you could turn around. So it's a full body red light therapy panel, and it does not compromise on the EMF safety.
Yeah, I love mine. It's really good.
Good.
So can we go into what the benefits of red light therapy are?
Yeah.
And the benefits of heat therapy?
Yeah. Let's start with red light. And red light is sort of a bit complex in the sense that it just looks as the word says it, right? It's red light. But I think red light therapy also stands for photobiomodulation. And what that means is it's an activation of the cells through light. So, right. So photon is a Greek word, means sort of light essentially. And red light therapy consists of two wavelengths or two types of frequencies. The first one is red light, which should have a frequency of 600 to 660 nanometers. That's part of the visible light, which is why when you see a red light therapy device, it's insanely bright. Like you can't really look into it because it's so bright. And you have the near infrared part, which has 800 to 860 nanometers, which is partly invisible. And the research has shown that if these two specific frequencies, which almost act like a laser just because it's such tiny frequencies, such tiny proportions of the light spectrum, if they come together at the right intensity, then it triggers our photoreceptors in our skins. Now, the photoreceptors, we have them everywhere in our skin. They essentially are an activation method for a body, like a genetic program that says, hey, there's light. Now I'm going to kick off a couple of processes internally, right? So if you think about like vitamin D and sunlight, we need it, but we don't do anything for it. We just have to expose our skin. And somehow at the end, we produce vitamin D. And we have a lot of these beautifully genetically modified programs where we don't have to do anything. Our body is just genetically engineered to do that. And with red light therapy, it doesn't create a tan, right? So it's because it's not ultraviolet light. But what it does, it triggers the production of ATP, which is an energy unit inside the body, and our mitochondria. And the mitochondria, I think, is a very popular word at the moment. There's essentially the engines for our body. If we want to have good energy, if we want to sleep well and do exercise and be at peak performance, we need healthy mitochondria. And I think there's a lot of research happening at the moment too. Like if someone is chronically fatigued or whatnot, that can link to an underperformance or an underfunctioning of the mitochondria. And mitochondria are influenced by a variety of different things: sleep, exercise, sauna, ice bath, sunlight, right? There's a whole lot of things that positively influence our mitochondria, but one of them also is light. And this red light therapy really triggers within 10 to 15 minutes, it releases energy and produces ATP inside our body, which then triggers a range of different health benefits. And there's more than 10,000 studies at the moment in the US, for instance. It's an FDA class 2 product, right? So it's not a medical product, but there's scientific backing to really showcase the health benefits. And I believe like that's why you see such a rise in popularity of red light therapy. You see blankets, you see face masks, you see panels,
everywhere
you see
now.
beds, you see everything. And it's beautiful because it's fairly cheap, at least if you compare it to sort of medical devices that produce similar results. it's quite versatile. The way you can use it is non-invasive. There's pretty much no contraindications. Right, so you can't overdo it. You can't burn your skin, as for instance, if you have a UV light at home, you really got to be careful that you're not actually causing skin damage. And it's such a variety of health benefits with medical and research backing that almost makes it, it's almost, you can't really ignore it, I think. And that's why it's so popular at the moment.
So what's the difference between being in sunlight and doing some red light therapy, for instance, in the morning?
Yeah. So I think that's a good question. I mean, it really comes down to the details, right? Like I think to give you a plain answer, it's just a different spectrum.
Okay.
It's just a different light spectrum. But the beautiful thing about sunlight, and I think that's why we'll probably never be able to substitute sunlight and don't want to substitute sunlight, that sunlight technically is full spectrum. It covers all the different ranges. It has UV, infrared, near infrared, far infrared. Like it's a cocktail of light that we really need. And we absorb it through our eyes, we absorb it through our skin, and especially in the morning, daylight exposure, I think within the first hour of the day has really shown that we're able to reduce cortisol. And I think that's just a non-negotiable. Like even I would never recommend to substitute daylight exposure with red light therapy.
What I was asking. What about in places where they don't get a lot of sunlight, like in the winter?
That's exactly, I think, where red light really has a very promising potential, right? Because and I'm in Europe at the moment, right? We have maybe 6 hours of daylight, maybe 7. The days are getting longer again. Like
different in Byron Bay, isn't it?
There you go. I woke up at 6 a.m. It was dark, and it's just starting. But even then, you don't have the sun. And I think like that's where these artificial light sources can be a really useful source of light, to still benefit off that light exposure to some extent. And I think if you ask me, always go for a walk. But then if if it's 0 degrees and you really can't expose your skin to that, I think when red light therapy is very interesting and very promising. And I think the other piece is also at nighttime, that's what we haven't talked about really, is there's good and bad light. Light is always there. And when I say good and bad light, it's we need light. There's various different light sources. Natural light is always good. But if we think about the use of LEDs, smartphones, computers, TVs, and whatnot at nighttime, these keep us awake. That's in plain terms what it is, right? Like, we know that blue light exposure after bedtime, which is when we're supposed to wind down, messes around with our melatonin rhythm. And the more we do that, the less, it's not that we'll sleep less necessarily, but it'll take us longer to fall asleep if we've had high blue light exposure. And with that, we're not getting the same sleep quality in. And with that, we feel not as relaxed. And then with that, most likely, and that's what studies have shown too, we're binging more. We're eating more junk food because we feel the need to get more food in as a consequence of the lack of sleep. And that's where I think red light therapy at nighttime can be really beneficial too, because it is an artificially created natural light frequency, right? So it's essentially taking the same frequencies that you would have during, say, sunrise or sunset. It doesn't mess with melatonin if it's a good light. And you could just shine it on the wall, and substitute this, for instance, by using LEDs. Like even better would be candles, because there's literally nothing artificial in it. But I think that's the second use case where you might want to use red light therapy at night to just really bring that calmness, maybe have a chamomile tea if you have sleep issues, and just really go to bed.
So would you recommend morning or night one more than the other, or either? Doesn't matter.
Depends on, it's the same with saunas, and we'll touch base on that later. Like there's really no right or wrong. Like I prefer to do it in the morning just to get that influx of energy. But for instance, as I said, like if you want to have high quality light at night, then I think you'd also use a red light therapy at night. Just make sure that you don't look into it, or because it is bright, like every every single light has an impact on our melatonin production.
Doesn't matter what
it's
color.
just that's some of the blue light will have a stronger effect, whereas this red light has lesser of an effect, so to speak. But the other option is obviously to use it before or after exercise. That could be another one. You could even use it for reading, put it on the
Mhm.
wall and sort of use it passive light. But I know most people use it in the morning, at least in the darker winter month.
Yeah. And
Saunas?
the benefits of the light. So you've got the energy, helping with better sleep. Is it the same sort of thing with the infrared heat?
Um, no, like I think
Different.
it fundamentally acts differently. So if we think about red light therapy, we're able to energize our cells, right? So we're essentially able to release and produce more energy equivalents in the body, and that then triggers a variety of different benefits. And if we think about exercising, for instance, like that's when we put strain on a muscle. We have a buildup of inflammation in the muscle, and this is oxidative stress. It's positive stress, but nonetheless, it's inflammation. If we use red light therapy, for instance, after exercise, we're able to reduce that inflammation and speed up the recovery of the muscle. So that's the sort of the analogy. There's a ton of health benefits when it comes to thyroid health, over or under regulation. That could also be, a matter of lack of light, and red light therapy has shown to really be beneficial for that. There is, if you have skin inflammation, so acne or psoriasis, for instance, then that's been really shown to reduce the inflammation in the body. There is sleep is another one, stress is another one. There's first studies happening on dementia, just to understand really how more energy in the cells is essentially able to reduce some of the symptoms of dementia. Oh, there's literally a ton of them. We have skin health is a big one, right? So when it comes to collagen or elastin production as a consequence of just having more energy to support the repair processes in the skin. There's even been a study dedicated on red light, and I think it was mind blowing, because if you looked at the red light, I think for the first 3 minutes of waking up, and it needs to be I think it needs to be 620 nanometers. The study showed a 15% eyesight improvement within 3 months. That's
Okay, I need
mind
to keep
blowing. Like
doing
if
that
you
because I'm
say to
having to wear
someone,
my glasses more.
well, and if you think about it, I mean, you just look into this light for 3 months, and it's shown to improve it by not just by 1 or 2%, but by 15%. And that's just a couple of them. There's even more. Like it's been linked to grip strength improvement, endurance
Wow.
running, right? Which is why a lot of the sports team are
Okay.
interested in that. There's literally, it's sort of the one trick pony, so to speak, because it just benefits on so many different levels. The interesting bit though is that, and I want to be quite transparent here, some people say they don't feel any benefits.
Yeah.
Right. So you use it and you say, well, yes, it's nice and it feels good, but it's really hard to say whether it's actually really yielded the improvement that I have. And I think and I'm the same. Like if I use it, I feel great. I believe if I use the workout, like I understand, I definitely feel stronger and more resilient. But if I just use it, for instance, for my skin, it's really hard to really quantify, because we do so many other things. We probably take
Yeah, of
collagen, we take
course.
mushrooms and whatnot.
Diet.
But the interesting bit, and I think that's where I've had probably one of the leading doctors on my German podcast, is he says, because of the way that we used to live, meaning outdoors all the time,
Yeah.
and now as living indoors, we're essentially tipping the balance of what light we need. And he sort of gave the example of vitamin D. Like 25 years ago, vitamin D was a thing, but it definitely wasn't as popular. Right nowadays, a lot of people substitute, even in Australia or the UAE, where it's so hot you can't be outside, which means people are vitamin D deficient. They substitute it. And he says the next thing he believes after this sort of vitamin D trend or rush or necessity is really a near infrared insufficiency that we have, because he says like modern windows and sun lotions and they take out the near infrared too.
Sunglasses
And he says we need it. Like if you mess around with the light balance of what we as individuals need, we're tipping around with our biology and how our processes works. And therefore he believes it's absolutely substantial that every person has some sort of near infrared exposure. And there's two ways: sunlight, although obviously you do need to be careful with the UV light so that you're not really damaging your skin, or red light therapy, which is a very safe way of near infrared light. And I think that's why he believes it's sort of part of the hygiene protocol, similar to brushing your teeth.
Hmm.
You just need that 10 minutes of near infrared, which is all you need.
Like
I found
every
that an
day.
interesting approach. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I definitely notice the energy levels improve when I have a sauna with the red light in the morning.
Yeah.
When I have just a sauna at night, it helps me sleep. But yeah, the I noticed the other day I did a infrared sauna in the morning, and just, yeah, I was like bursting with energy. So it's just making
Great.
sure you fit it into your schedule somewhere a few times a week, isn't it? That's our
Yeah. And I think like
mm,
that's really key. You know, there's so much stuff you can purchase and you can do for your health, but it comes down to the execution. And I agree
yeah,
with you. If you're somehow able to slot it into your daily
mm,
routine,
few
that's
days a
great. And I
week.
think, and that's the reason why we sort of integrated it into the sauna,
Mm.
because otherwise you have another thing that you want to
I know.
line up. And let's be honest, we all have 24 hours and then we get kids and family and work and friends.
Yeah.
And I think that's where oftentimes it falls short.
Well, that's why I also love the little small ones that you can just sit and have
Yeah.
the infrared light in your eyes first thing in the morning for a few
Yeah.
minutes, and that's something at least. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I drink it, I drink my coffee, which I really
yeah,
love. Like I love coffee.
me too.
Um, and that's when I use the red light, right? And I
Yeah,
just feel like, okay, great, and I could,
yeah,
if I wanted to, I could read a book. Don't
yeah.
do it often, but sometimes I do. And
Mm.
that sort of becomes a bit of a habit stacking, which I
Yes,
like
I
to
was
call
about to
it.
say
So
habit stacking.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, cool.
Very good.
And I think to get back to the other question that you mentioned in terms of
The
the
heat.
heat, the
Mm.
heat benefits. Now, oftentimes red light therapy, you could actually call it, because some people remember these old red light heat bulbs. I know
Yes.
in Germany it's a thing where if you got clogged up, because you've had a cold and you can't get the mucus out, you'd use a red light heat bulb, which gets really hot. It's an halogen
Mm.
bulb, because it expands essentially your cells, and with that
Mm.
you're able to get some of the mucus out ideally.
Okay.
And some people call red light therapy cold red light, because
Okay.
whilst it's insanely bright, it's actually and there's some warmth to it, but it's not hot. Like
Yeah.
you can touch it, you can put your hands on that
Mm.
panel without burning yourself, and that's due to the fact that it's the near infrared that doesn't really have a whole lot of heat energy associated with it. The red light is just red light. But if we now move to heat, it's a fundamentally different mechanism, and you
Mm.
can't say, oh, I've done red light therapy and therefore I can save on the sauna, or the other way around.
Mm.
Like they
It's two
they
different
work
things.
fundamentally differently. And heat is super trendy at the moment. There's a ton of research happening. Like there was this Finnish long-term study that really showed that if you used it 5 to 7 times per week, that was in Finnish men, that it reduced your all-cause mortality risk by up to, I think, 43% or something. So
Mm.
that's a mind-boggling number.
Mm.
And unfortunately, it was done in men. I think that's just the history of how research was conducted, right? Because men don't give birth, they don't have the menopause, so that is easier to look at. But
Study.
fortunately, there's more and more research coming out with women too, because we understand now that men and women are not equal. Also in the way that we react to these stressors, and with the cycle is just different, right? So there's different needs. There's anyway, like more about that than I do, but um and I think that's why like heat is really trendy at the moment. And the basic mechanism of heat is always the fact that heat is stress. Our body needs to deal with that stress, and over time, our heart rate goes up, our body temperature goes up, and our body starts to break a sweat because we need to cool the body. And there's two different ways that you can achieve that, right? One is a traditional sauna, 80, 90 degrees or 95 degrees, or however you want to use it. You stay in there for 10 to 15 minutes if you can. A lot of people have issues with that high heat,
Mm.
and you do 2 to 3 rounds. Beautiful ritual, especially in sort of Northern Europe, very, very trendy. That's where it all stems from. The second one is what we primarily do, is infrared heat. And rather than aiming for temperatures of say 80 or 90 degrees Celsius, you use infrared heating panels to produce infrared heat or infrared light and that shines on the body. And over time, our body's temperature raises, just as a consequence of the absorption of that infrared light. And you don't use it for, say, 3 times 10 minutes, but you stay in there, as you know, for 30 to 45 minutes, because it takes that initial build-up time to really create that heat. But once you're there, you sweat profusely. And I think some people will really say, wow, like an infrared sauna, if you use it for 45 minutes, it's probably equally intense to a traditional sauna.
Oh, yeah.
But what I do like, and I think oftentimes people ask, what's better? Is infrared or traditional better? And I think that's the wrong question to ask. It really comes down to your preference, because what good is it if you have a traditional sauna, but you only use it once a month because either electricity is too expensive because they take a lot more to run, or it takes an hour to get hot and you realize you don't have the time. And that's why I think the infrared sauna has really come in and solved that problem, because it just plugs into a normal 10 amp outlet, or 20 amp if you choose a bigger size. The preheating time for the portable one is maybe 5 minutes. For the cabinets, maybe 15 to 20 minutes. And then you use it for 40 minutes. You can use a red light therapy. You can do a meditation. You can read a book. You can even put a salt therapy in. And it allows you to just, with under an hour, you're able to preheat and use the infrared sauna, and you're able to do other things. And I think that's really where it works so effectively, because you're able to do it multiple times a week. And the research indicates that, yes, if you, for instance, do a sauna once a week, that's great, because it still activates the heat shock proteins, which is really what you want for longevity and for cell repair and whatnot. But the more frequently you're able to do it, the more you'll be able to harness some of these results and the benefits. And then coming to the benefits, it's obviously cardiovascular health, because it is stress. Our heart needs to cope with that. It is detoxification, right? Because we're not just losing sweat, we're losing minerals, but we're also losing toxins through our sweat. There's been a groundbreaking study that really looked at what is more effective, is detoxification through sweat, or through urine, or through excretion, or through blood. And for some of these substances, sweat was a lot more effective than, for instance, urine or excretion. And that was heavy metals. Doesn't mean that that's the only pathway of detoxification, but it's one of the major ones.
Yeah.
And then you spoke about energy. You feel great when you come out of it. Like, there's a ton of other benefits, but I think to me the big ones are cardiovascular health, detoxification, and probably stress, right? Because we're allowing ourselves to rest and come out of that
It's
fight or
very
flight
relaxing.
mode. Yeah. Sorry, it was a long
some of these.
answer.
No, that's great. It's great.
Yeah.
No, there's so many questions, and I know you haven't got too much longer that you can stay. So I might quickly ask you a few things here. Let me see. First of all, I might just read out these comments from readers that have had benefits, because people listening will probably find this helpful. One lady said, I used to have headaches as a kid. She lived in Austria. And she said the medical doctor wrote her a prescription for infrared treatments, pulled out of school an hour every day for treatments, never had headaches after that. I thought that was really interesting.
Wow. I've never heard that before, but fantastic.
Yeah. Another lady said, I love my daily sauna. It helps me detox, plus photomodulation therapy is healing as well. So that's the light therapy.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like some people call it a red light sauna. It's just really important to understand that an infrared sauna does not give you photobiomodulation. These are two separate things.
Okay.
Right. And the intensity and the frequencies are important. But man, like, use your infrared sauna, like, continue doing what you do, because you clearly feel great.
Yeah. There's a few more, but someone says, we have an infrared sauna, which I love. I use it 3 times a week. I'm keen to find out more about red light therapy. So there's lots of people in my groups that are talking about it. So some of the questions I was asked is it safe for people with a history of melanoma, and are there studies to show that it doesn't cause cancer?
Melanoma is an interesting one. Because you don't have any UV light in red light therapy, like, it's, you can look it up. There's literally no UV. It's a fundamentally different spectrum. You're not even the slightest touch of tanning or ultraviolet in these devices. I believe it's safe to use. In fact, it might actually be supportive of your healing and of dealing with melanoma. And the reason why I say that is that there have been studies that looked at skin repair properties of using red light therapy with skin damages. And that was particular when someone had a very strong sunburn, where obviously the skin gets damaged. You can actually use a red light therapy to aid some of that. And that's just what I find mind-boggling, right? Because you always think it's the near infrared that does the damage, but it's actually not true. It's more, I mean, it contributes together with the UV, which is by far the bigger problem. And it's been supportive of healing that. In terms of studies that show that, I mean, you wouldn't really research that, right? You wouldn't really research, does red light therapy cause cancer?
Cause cancer, because you have to
right.
try it on.
So there's not been any studies on that, but I think equally, if you have more than 10,000 studies on the health benefits of red light therapy, you would think that at least one of them highlights potential dangers when it comes to cancers. And cancer is probably the biggest killer that we have in our society that we don't have answers to. And it's probably lifestyle, it's probably genetics, there's a whole lot of different things. But if we understand that our body needs mitochondria, we need healthy mitochondria to produce ATP, then I'm 99% confident that a red light therapy actually does not cause cancer, but probably helps you live a healthier lifestyle to prevent some of these, catastrophic diseases that we currently have in society. But I think the nature of a study like this would never be conducted. But you'd have to look at the contraindications, and there almost are none unless someone has epilepsy, right? Which is where they can be quite sensitive to intense and light flickering. But that's probably the only contraindications I've ever heard of when it comes to red light therapy.
Someone did ask about that. They said, how can you tell if the panels are low flicker?
It's really hard. I mean, what you can do is you can probably take a video with your phone, and you can actually do that with your kitchen lights too. If they're LEDs, and you take a video, say 5 seconds, and you display it on 20% or 10% of the speed. Yeah, so you can, take a video with your phone, and then try to display it on whatever slowest speed you're able to display it, and you'll see some of the flickers, say on a kitchen LED or on your computer. And then you can potentially try to replicate that with the red light therapy. But I think that's probably one of the reasons why I would suggest that you're not buying anything on Amazon or Alibaba, because who guarantees you that the frequencies are what they're supposed to be, the intensity is what they're supposed to be, and then you have low flicker. You just don't know. And you don't have the measurement tools, which would cost you at least 5,000 AU dollars upwards to have a spectrometer, to have an EMF meter, and yada, yada, yada. So I just think it's wrong to save on maybe 300 or 400 Aussie dollars for something where you don't actually really know. And I believe that's the place where good quality companies with integrity fill that position. You have a warranty, you have a customer support team on the ground, and are you able to find it cheaper elsewhere? 100%. But you won't know what you buy because you don't have the measurement tools to really verify it. And I think that's the biggest problem with red light therapy.
Is it expensive to run with power?
No, and I think it's because it's a fraction of an infrared sauna, and even infrared saunas are quite cheap to run. To put this into perspective, if you ran, for instance, a 2-person sanctuary sauna, that's what we have on offer, it probably draws around 2,000 watts, maybe 2,200 watts. If we assume that a kilowatt hour costs maybe 50 cents just for the ease of it, then per hour of running a 2-person infrared sauna is $1.
Oh.
Now, a red light therapy panel probably has, maybe just for the ease of calculate, 250 watts. Like, obviously depends on the size that you're getting. That would be an eighth more or less of that, right? So plus you're not running it for an hour, you're running it for 10 minutes or maybe 15 minutes if you want to run it nonstop. So you're talking, I don't know, 5 to 10 to 15 cents per session of red light therapy that you're using. And so no, it's
really low.
It's almost, you probably won't even notice it on your electricity.
With the red light therapy panels, sometimes they're really bright and you've got to protect your eyes, but the smaller ones you don't have to. So, you know, if someone's trying to use it for their eyesight, they would just get a small one. Am I right? Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, obviously, ideally you just get a full wall panel, right? So that you're sort of able to use it for
Can
your
you
full
look at it
body.
though?
But well, you could, right? It's just because of the size, it's probably quite intense, right? So I agree
I've
with
got
you.
that big one. It's very bright.
If you really want it for your eyesight, then I agree with you. Probably get a smaller one and just trial it for a little bit. Yeah, that's
If
probably
you
the
do
better
have
way.
a big one, so you can look at it, like maybe back off a bit, or is it just don't?
Well, it's a liability thing, right? Like I think, you know, overexposure of, like, you're not supposed to look into the sun for, you know,
That's
for a lot
right.
of the
Yeah.
time, right? And I think the sun is made of 50% of near infrared.
Mhm.
And I think, again, you have 50% near infrared, 50% red light therapy in these devices, which is why we always give protection goggles with it. I just close my eyes. I find it
Yeah.
too bright to look into it anyway.
Yeah.
And, you know, but if you looked at it, I don't know, for a minute or two, probably just because you like it, I don't think there's any problem with it. I just wouldn't recommend looking into the near infrared just because it's intense. And that's why some people use sunglasses, others use the goggles. I just
Okay.
close my eyes. I find that's the better way.
Yep. Well, that's good
Yeah.
to know. So I think we've asked a few of these, answered a few of these already. Okay, so there's a few health and wellness questions. Can
Mhm.
red light therapy help with inflammatory bowel disease or inflammation in the gut? Do you know?
Yeah. I
Sorry,
haven't
hard question.
verified. No, I haven't verified the study.
Yeah.
But I've seen some companies in Europe advertise that you should just use trying the red light therapy on your organs. And it's, you know, a friend of mine owns one of the companies. I trust him. I trust his integrity. And again, I haven't verified the study, but
Mhm.
if you think about chronic inflammation and a lack of energy and probably an over, like just a high dose of oxidative stress in the tissue,
Mhm.
in those cells, then the your natural path to remedy would be to reduce inflammation.
Yeah.
Now, is red light therapy the only answer? Of course
No,
not. Like, you
also
have to probably work on your sleep. You have to
your
probably
gut health.
figure out what's wrong with your diet, right? You have to
Mm.
probably look at what other things can I do to really support my microbiome. But I do think, you're not causing any damage if you use red light therapy on your organs, right? There's almost no contraindications. It's not like you'll
Mm.
burn or you'll feel nasty from it. So I think it's worth a try. And I think really try to use it for 30 days, nonstop, every day for 10 minutes at 20 centimeters distance
Mm.
and see how you go. But it's not the holy grail. But I
Yeah.
do think it can support some of that, you know, reduction of inflammation, and support of gut health. And Andrew Huberman, which I think a lot of you
Mm.
actually have known, he said light is probably one of the only things where you can even activate a cell in the body that isn't even exposed to that light.
Mm.
And it's one of the only few things that can do that without invasion, meaning surgery.
Yeah.
So think about that.
Mm.
You know, and the same with vitamin D. If you think about it, yes, you'll have some sunlight, say, on your shoulder. And yes, you might get a bit of a tan, but what it does to your mood and the way you feel and the energy you get is far beyond just having exposed your shoulder to the sunlight. And that's how I like to think about red light. And therefore, I
Mm.
think with this gut and the inflammation, give it a shot and you'll
Yeah.
probably see some benefits. Is it going to remedy and resolve it completely? Probably not. But I would expect it to provide some relief and some benefit.
Because the light doesn't just penetrate right close to the skin, it penetrates further, quite far in, doesn't it? I can't remember
Yes.
how much. I did listen to that
Well,
Human podcast, but I can't remember.
again, some companies say it's wild 5 centimeters.
Okay.
Wikipedia, I think, says half a centimeter.
We
I
don't
don't
know.
think anyone really knows,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
it's what is fascinating, it's really hard to replicate, but if you have a small red light and you put it in here and you turn it around, you'll see the light through, come through on the other
Yeah.
end. So I don't know. I think it penetrates deeper, but who knows? I mean, I think it's more important to understand that there's a whole lot of fundamental processes in our skin and in our body that are triggered as a consequence of that.
Yeah. And people use it for arthritis. They use it
big time.
for like muscle soreness or
Yep.
wound healing,
Stiffness, wound healing, skin
scarring.
health, scar. Yeah,
What
exactly.
about
Yeah.
nerve damage?
Ooh, very complex.
Okay.
It depends. What's the severity of the nerve damage?
Yeah.
Is it repairable? Can it heal or not? I wouldn't
Don't
feel
know.
qualified enough to make a conclusion on this.
Yeah. You mentioned thyroid. Do you know
Yeah.
anything about thinning hair or hair regrowth if it helps with that?
Yeah,
Really?
it's a question of what's the reason for thin hair. Like if you just genetically programmed because your parents have had that, then it's tricky. But there's a trend for infrared helmets. I don't know if you've seen that; they look kind of
Yeah.
funky,
Yeah. That's probably
similar
why
to what
someone
Star
asked
Wars.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, there's merit to it. Like it supports, it supports the skin, it supports wounds, it supports your nails, and it
Because it's
supports hair growth.
regenerating cells, helping the
It
cells.
does. It's just, I think I've read somewhere that it's not enough to just use red light. You need to almost microneedle your scalp too, so that you cause that activation. So I think, but I haven't followed the protocol. But there's something there. I think if you just ask ChatGPT or just go on Google, you'll probably find some. Just be mindful that there's a ton of companies who own that space. You
Yes.
don't want to read it up on a company's website. You sort of really want to look at PubMed or
Yes.
at least some sort of the Mayo Clinic or the World Health Organization if you find that a trustworthy source. But don't just read on a red light therapy company's page, or at least if you do, see where the source stems from,
Yeah.
and then
See
you're
if
able
they've
to
got
verify it
studies
yourself.
linked. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And is it safe for pregnant and breastfeeding mums? Yep.
Yeah, should be. There's no detoxification happening, which is why sort of some infrared sauna companies say you shouldn't do it, right? Because that detox barrier is, with the mother-child connection is not fully understood. Red light therapy is absolutely safe for pregnant women, but also for breastfeeding women.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also someone asked if they can do it if they're light sensitive because of certain medications they're on.
That is something you really need to either test it for yourself, right? So we offer a 30-day money-back warranty, and I probably just double check that you just use it on your hand for a couple of minutes or your arm, see how you react to it as opposed to going all in. You have something similar with people that use strong antibiotics. You're not supposed to go out in the sun.
Okay.
It's not just the vitamin D or the UV light, but it can also be just light in general. Again, it really depends on where you're at and what you're taking. If you have a good MD, ask him or her, but most likely they'll not have heard of red light therapy. And if that's the case, I think purchase from a company. I'll obviously be happy if you purchase it from us, where you have a 30-day money-back warranty. Just keep the packaging, test it, see how you go. If you don't like it, then I think you can just ship it back and get the refund.
There was a couple of people saying that they'd heard that being in being in an infrared sauna is like microwave heat and it's heating you up from the inside. Pretty sure that's not right, but anyway, if you could just quickly touch on that.
It's right. Yeah, it's just I think the microwave comparison just doesn't make sense. But that's exactly what I touched base on earlier. Like if you think about a traditional sauna, you have hot air, and this hot air is sort of it heats you up from the outside to the inside because it's hot outside. Takes some time for your skin and for your body to sort of really crank up to. With infrared, because you're only going in when it's say 40 degrees or 35 degrees, you sort of have a more gradual and slower increase of the temperature, and it's infrared heat or light or wavelength that essentially are absorbed by the body, and then with that converts essentially into heat, and it is like a very soft microwaving, but obviously completely without any harm. There's no UV, no dangerous radiation at all. You do heat up from the inside to the outside, meaning first your core temperature goes up, then your body needs to react by cooling down the body, which is when we start to sweat. And then with that also the temperature in the cabin goes up at the same time as well. Just a funny comparison, right? Because
It is.
microwaves are such a hot
People
iron.
get a vision in their mind of getting microwaved.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
But
I
just by the
think,
way, like there's a ton of studies coming out on infrared
yeah,
saunas, for firefighters and heavy metal exposure. There's been a
yeah,
study in Brisbane that looked at, I think, women. There's been, for a long time, people used to say, oh, it's not a real sauna. It doesn't produce heat shock proteins. Doctors say that's actually not true, right? So
yeah.
I think and you have to think about the fact that infrared saunas only really were developed in the 1980s, 1990s. It's a
Mhm.
very, very new type of technology,
Mhm.
whereas traditional saunas have been around for almost, I want to say centuries, or, at least decades. And that's why I think infrared saunas have a lot to catch up on.
Mhm.
But what you also need to understand is that infrared therapy, meaning hypothermia treatments for cancer, that they've been a thing in Europe for the last 30 years. Like if you go to Germany to get cancer treatments, yes, you have the chemotherapy option, but you can also get hypothermia treatments, which is artificially inducing a fever using near infrared in the human body. And you
Mhm.
do have a similar effect in an infrared sauna. Obviously, a lot less intense because hypothermia is sort of a medical treatment. We, can't describe that. But over a 40-minute session, your temperature goes up by probably 1.5 degrees Celsius. You'll actually create a fever of 38.5 Celsius, which is when you would sit on the sofa, you'd measure that, you'd be like, oh my God, like my body is going through something here. And it's great
Yeah.
that it's attacking that, because fever is a positive thing. But
Yes.
you would probably rest at home and say, "Ah, I'm not working and I'm not exercising," right? And you're able to artificially trigger a similar response in an infrared sauna in a perfectly safe way.
Yeah, amazing. I just thought of one more thing, a story. A friend of mine had really high metals and she was very unwell, and so were her kids. And she started doing saunas as well as working on her gut health and all the other things, because like we said, there's more than just one thing that you got to work on. And I remember at first she could sit in that sauna for half an hour and she would not sweat. And it took a lot of time for her to finally start sweating and start detoxing. It's like her body was holding on to those metals. She's so much better now, years later.
Wow.
But I remember how excited she was when she first started sweating in the sauna.
Yeah.
So if someone's just starting with infrared saunas and they're not really sweating much at first, is that just common sometimes? The
Yeah.
detox pathways are a bit blocked.
Yeah, it's exactly what you said. Like I think, I mean, if you think about it, other than an infrared sauna, where do we sweat? I mean,
Mm.
yes, when it's hot in summer, and maybe if we do a
Mowing the
spinning
lawn.
class or a workout, but like
Yeah.
we're not really trained, and our system isn't really used to that type of stress and to that type of heat. And then the unfortunate thing is that we obviously consume a lot of perfumes and
Mhm.
and cosmetica, and we now understand that there's alcohol in it, there's microplastics in it. There, with some of them, I'm sure there's heavy metals in it, and that we haven't even touched on drinking water or food, right? Which adds another layer of complexity to that.
Dental things
And that's what we oftentimes say is like people after the first two sessions, I'm not sweating, this thing doesn't work. And we're like,
yeah.
whoa, 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 like, hold on. Like, you can't expect your body who's just done something for 10, 20 years where you hardly sweat at all, because in society, we're not really endorsing or we're not cheering for you. When we see someone outside sweating, we're like,
I'm
oh,
trying to block that.
there you go. But it's actually perfectly
Mm.
healthy, right? And I think we're able to do that in an infrared sauna in a safe environment. And I think there are a couple of ways of what you can do. The first one is increase water intake,
Mm.
right? So I think maybe an hour before, have at least half a liter to a liter of water in you, because if you're chronically not hydrated well enough, and we understand that our body is, I think, 78% made up of water, but we don't have enough water, well, then the body is not can't really use water for
Mm.
sweating, which is a natural mechanism. The second one is take a hot shower beforehand. That's gonna help you increase that
Body heat.
temperature already before
Mm.
you go in the sauna. If you fancy do a workout, could be jumping jacks for, I don't know, a minute, could be a 20 minutes hit class, or just anything that raises the core temperature.
Mhm.
And do look at electrolytes or some minerals if you really do that, because obviously if you're mineral deficient, something in the system doesn't really function well. And if you do that, I probably 6 or 7 times, like meaning 6 or 7 sessions, you will sweat. Like I've never met a single person who hasn't started to sweat. It's going to take them longer, but there's reasons for that in the body, and it takes time for that change to happen.
Yeah.
And for the body to get used to opening up the sweat glands, letting that sweat out, supporting the detoxification pathways. And what you notice is the more often you do it, the easier you'll sweat.
Awesome. Good tips. Well, thank you so much. Where can people find you to find out more about what you have, your products? I can put a link.
Yeah, so we, thank you. Yeah, we, look, I'm on LinkedIn if you want to, if you want to reach out to me personally. Alternatively, we do have a local team in Australia and New Zealand. It's obviously, if you just type in Clearlight Saunas Australia, you'll find us. And then I think it's Helsi, Helsi.life, HELSI. We just look for healthy saunas. You'll find us too. We've got red lights on there with the portable one. As I mentioned before, we have the ice bath. If you want to sort of speak with an expert, it's probably best to reach out on the Clearlight website. There's a phone number there. You can book a call. There's various different ways of how you can get in touch with the team.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been great. I think we've answered most of the questions, if not all of them. So thank you for your time.
Fantastic.
It's great.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Loved being on the show, and hope we catch up in person.
Yeah, that would be great. I'll be in Europe in June.
I'll be in Australia in March, but I'll be back in June. So yeah, let's see how we go.
Yeah. All right. Lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for being on the show.